The General Ridgway Pittsburgh chapter of the Military Order of the World Wars is a patriotic organization made up of military officers from all branches of the service. They have as their motto, "It is better to serve than to be served." The MOWW is pleased to make available this pictorial presentation on the presidents who served our country prior to and during the Revolutionary War. You will learn their names, their background, and what transpired during their term of office. This presentation will attempt to bring to light that there were 14 men who served as president of the 13 colonies during the early stages of our republic. Perhaps one of them might be considered the first president of the colonial times, since a number of them made significant contributions prior to and during the Revolutionary War, which led to the formation of our current form of government. See which one you would select to be our first president of the colonial era, if any at all. It is important to understand that the committees of correspondence were the American colonies' way of maintaining communications prior to the Revolutionary War. This was an extremely important concept and the first step in unifying the colonies. In 1764, Boston formed the earliest committee to encourage an exchange of information. The following year, New York formed a similar committee to keep the other colonies aware of its actions in resisting the British Stamp Act. In 1772, the Boston Committee became active once again in opposing Britain's enforcing custom regulations and prohibiting the issuance of American paper money. In 1773, the Virginia House of Burgesses proposed that each colony appoint a committee. The exchanges that followed built solidarity and helped bring about the formation of the First Continental Congress in 1774. The 13 colonies of America were located on what is now known as the eastern coast of the United States. Each colony was an independent state without a unified voice until the committees of correspondence evolved into a national assembly known as the First and Second Continental Congress to address problems related to Great Britain's rule of law and taxation without representation. Originally, the President of Congress was by design a position with little authority. The Continental Congress, fearful of concentrating too much power in an individual, such as a king, gave the President limited responsibilities. The President could not, for example, set the legislative agenda or make committee appointments. The President could not meet privately with foreign leaders. The presidency was largely a ceremonial position. He received no salary. The primary role of the president was to preside over meetings of Congress and be an impartial moderator during debates. These restrictions varied with each president over the years. Carpenter's Hall was just completed in September of 1774 when it found itself host to the First Continental Congress, which met to oppose British rule. The meeting's objectives were to make sure that the King and Parliament were made aware and fully understood the grievances of the colonies. In addition, the body must communicate the same objectives to the American people and the world. Peyton Randolph, a close friend of George Washington and cousin of Thomas Jefferson, was elected president on September 5, 1774, by the 56 delegates in attendance. He served as a neutral discussion moderator during meetings. The presidency was thought of to be largely a ceremonial position without much influence. Randolph served 7 weeks until October 22nd, 1774, when he became ill and had to return home. This was 4 days prior to the end of the meeting, thus necessitating the election of a new president, namely Henry Middleton. What do you think? Should Randolph be considered the first president? And if not, why not? It was 1774. Henry Middleton became president during Peyton Randolph's absence due to his illness. He served from October 22nd to the 26th, the last 4 days of the First Continental Congress. Thereafter, he served until May 10th, 1775, the beginning of the Second Continental Congress, when he was replaced by none other than Peyton Randolph. During Middleton's tenure, the battles of Lexington and Concord took place, and Fort Ticonderoga fell to the colonists. After his presidency, he served as governor of South Carolina and minister to Russia. It was 1775. Peyton Randolph once again was elected president upon his return on May 10th. He was once again stricken by illness, and after 4 days in office, he returned home. He was replaced by John Hancock on May 14th. He died on October 22nd while dining with Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia. As previously noted, John Hancock was elected president of the Second Continental Congress on May 14, 1775, to succeed Randolph. He served until November 1st, 1777. There were 55 delegates in attendance. During his tenure, the Boston Tea Party took place, and a number of significant objectives accomplished, such as the Olive Branch Petition, the appointment of General Washington to head the Continental Army, the Declaration of Independence, and the passage of the Flag Act, each of which will be covered in more detail as follows. The year was 1773. The midnight raid in December, known as the Boston Tea Party, was in protest of the British Parliament's Tea Act, designed to save the faltering East India Company by lowering its tax on tea, thus assuring a monopoly on the American tea trade. In 1775, the Olive Branch Petition was signed on July 8th in a final attempt to avoid war between Great Britain and the 13 colonies. The intolerable acts were punitive laws passed by the British Parliament in 1774 after the Boston Tea Party. The laws were meant to punish the Massachusetts colonists for their defiance in the Tea Party protest. As evidenced by this appointment order, the Continental Congress commissioned George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army on June 19, 1775. Washington was selected over other candidates, such as John Hancock, based upon previous military experience and the hope that a leader from Virginia could help unite the colonies. The next month, Washington traveled to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to take command of the newly formed Continental Army positioned around Boston. The Second Continental Congress voted for independence on July 2, 1776. 2 days later, on July 4th, a declaration explaining the reasons for independence, largely written by Thomas Jefferson, was adopted. On July 6th, General Washington received official notification of the Declaration of Independence from President John Hancock. As depicted in each of these pictures, a number of battles and campaigns ensued between the colonists and the British, each of which would have greatly concerned the president in office at the time. The U.S. flag was adopted in 1777. In a letter dated May 25, 1780, Francis Hopkinson, a New Jersey congressman, requested payment for having designed the U.S. flag among other emblems. His request was rejected by the Treasury Board, which cited that Hopkinson was not the only person to submit a design and that he had already been paid as a governmental official. On May 29, 1777, Betsy Ross was paid by the Pennsylvania State Navy Board for making flags. 2 weeks later, on June 14th, the Congress passed the Flag Act, which described the flag in detail. The matter of who should receive credit is open for discussion. Henry Laurens succeeded John Hancock as president on November 1st, 1777. His term ended in December of 1778. His two greatest achievements during his tenure were the securing of the French alliance and the signing of the Articles of Confederation. Named by Congress in 1779 to negotiate a treaty with the Netherlands, he was captured at sea by the British with his dispatches and imprisoned in the Tower of London. After negotiations, he was released on December 31st, 1781, in exchange for General Lord Cornwallis. Upon the conclusion of the 1777 Philadelphia campaign, Washington led his poorly fed and weary army to winter quarters at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Washington's army was ravaged by disease, cold, and sickness during its time at Valley Forge. Washington had repeatedly asked Congress and other magistrates for support of his wasting army. During the time at Valley Forge, the Continental Army did receive improved field training from Baron von Steuben, who was appointed temporary Inspector General at the age of 47. He had been a captain in the German army, served as aide-de-camp to Frederick the Great, and was recommended to Congress by Benjamin Franklin, who mistranslated his service record by citing him as a lieutenant general. John Jay was elected president on December 10, 1778, and served 10 months until September of 1779. Jay, who was a graduate of King's College, now Columbia University, at the age of 19, was a prominent figure in New York state politics from an early age. While Jay was opposed to British interference in the colonies, he was against complete independence from Great Britain. Jay made two unsuccessful attempts to become president, after which he retired to his farm. In 1789, he was appointed the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and in 1795, he became the second governor of New York. The Second Continental Congress adopted the Articles of Confederation, the first written constitution of the United States, on November 15, 1777. However, ratification of the Articles by all 13 states did not occur until 3.5 years later, on March 1, 1781. The Articles created a loose confederation of sovereign states and a weak central government, leaving most of the power with the state governments. Samuel Huntington's hard work and calm manner earned him the respect of his fellow delegates. As a result, when John Jay left to become minister to Spain, Huntington was elected to succeed him in September of 1779. The office did require him to handle a good deal of correspondence and sign official documents. He spent his time pleading with states to support the levies for men, supplies, and money needed to fight the Revolutionary War. The Articles of Confederation were finally ratified in March of 1781, which limited the president's term to 1 year. Congress did not bother to elect a new president under the newly adopted Articles. Instead, Samuel Huntington continued to serve until July 9, 1781, when poor health forced him to resign and return to Connecticut. For the first time, the Articles of Confederation referred to our nation as the United States. Some historians argue that this makes Samuel Huntington the first president of the United States. One major incident which occurred during Huntington's tenure was the Benedict Arnold matter. After receiving command of the Hudson Highlands in June of 1780, Double Agent General Benedict Arnold agreed to help the British capture West Point for financial gain. Arnold met with his British contact, Major John André. They devised a plan to help the British capture West Point, which included a plot to capture General Washington while he dined with Arnold. The plan was uncovered and failed. On September 23, 1780, Major André was returning to British lines when he was captured by the New York militia. Washington's military court decided that he should be executed as a spy. Washington offered the British to exchange André for Arnold. The British refused. Washington ordered André's execution, which took place on October 2, 1780. Samuel Johnson became the first man to be elected as President of Congress after the ratification of the Articles of Confederation on March 1, 1781. However, he declined the office in July of that year to make himself available for North Carolina's gubernatorial election. After almost a month since the start of the American and French siege of Yorktown, Lord Cornwallis agreed to surrender his British and Haitian forces to General Washington. This victory over the British in 1781 is the final major military action of the Revolutionary War. In July of 1781, when poor health caused Samuel Huntington to resign as president and Samuel Johnson turned the office down, Thomas McKean was appointed their successor. He had been appointed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania in 1777, a position he continued to hold during his presidency and for nearly 20 years thereafter. He served a few months and offered to resign after hearing the news that the British surrendered at Yorktown. Congress asked him to remain in office until November of 1781, when a new session of Congress was scheduled to begin, which he agreed to. In November of 1781, John Hanson was elected president, succeeding Thomas McKean. The Articles of Confederation did not provide for an executive branch. Although the duties of president were not demanding, Hudson found the work tedious and considered resigning just after a week. Colleagues urged him to remain on since Congress lacked a quorum to choose a successor. Hanson agreed to fulfill a one-year term. John Hanson was the first president to be elected after the Articles of Confederation became effective on March 1, 1781. Therefore, Some historians believe he should be considered the first president. Elias Boudinot served a one-year term as president beginning on November 4, 1782, succeeding John Hanson. As president, he signed the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which officially ended the Revolutionary War. Prior to serving as president, he was on the board of trustees of Princeton College and was the Commissary General of Prisoners during the Revolutionary War. He subsequently became the director of the U.S. Mint and was elected as president of the American Bible Society. Thomas Mifflin served as president for 7 months beginning on November 3, 1783, replacing Boudinot. During the Revolutionary War, Mifflin served as a major and the chief aide-de-camp to General George Washington. He was appointed Quartermaster General of the Continental Army. He resigned as a Major General to serve as trustee of the University of Pennsylvania. Mifflin was the Speaker of the Pennsylvania State House of Representatives and a delegate to the State Constitution Convention that ratified the federal Constitution. He served as a governor of Pennsylvania. With the Revolutionary War at an end, General George Washington surrendered his commission to Congress in Annapolis, Maryland, on December 23, 1783. Washington's action reaffirmed his belief that the military was subordinate to civilian rule, which was a central principle of the United States. Richard Henry Lee began his presidency on November 30, 1784, having succeeded Mifflin. He was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses at the age of 25. He served in the Continental Congress and is most noted for his introducing the Resolution for Independence in June of 1776. He was a Virginia state legislator and served in the National Congress. He supported the Constitution after the decision was made to include a Bill of Rights and was elected senator from Virginia. However, he was forced to resign his position as senator due to poor health. For a second time, John Hancock was elected president on November 23, 1785. However, because of poor health, he only served 6 months. His presidential duties were performed by David Ramsay and Nathaniel Gorham, who were two chairmen of the Congress. Hancock was a graduate of Harvard University. He had served as the head of the committee that investigated the Boston Massacre. You might recall that Hancock was also president when the Declaration of Independence was adopted. He and Samuel Adams were the two most wanted men in the colonies by King George III. He served as a major general during the war and had served as governor of Massachusetts. Nathaniel Gorham replaced Hancock as president on June 6, 1786. He served the remaining 5 months that Hancock would have served. He was a member of the Massachusetts Colonial Legislature and was Speaker of the Massachusetts General Court. During the Revolutionary War, the British destroyed much of Gorham's property. Because of his commercial interest, he supported a new constitution that could control interstate commerce, a strong international trade base, and the regulation of paper money. He was ruined financially in a questionable land deal between New York and Massachusetts. After Gorham's presidency ended on November 3, 1786, the position remained vacant for 3 months until Arthur St. Clair was appointed president on February 2, 1787. He served the remaining 9 months until the end of the normal presidential term. St. Clair fought in the battles of Trenton and Princeton and earned the rank of Major General. His abandonment of Fort Ticonderoga during the war was a major area of controversy, even though it was viewed as militarily indefensible. The decision to allow British to recapture the fort cast doubts on St. Clair's military judgment, but he was cleared in a court-martial trial. He left the army and was appointed governor of the Northwest Territory. The Federalist Papers, which were a series of essays written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, are considered one of the most important sources for interpreting and understanding the original intent of the United States Constitution. They were published in 1787 and 1788. Cyrus Griffin was appointed president on January 22, 1788, succeeding Gorham. He resigned after 10 months, since only 2 delegates showed up to conduct the business of the Congress. He had studied law in Scotland. Back when the Revolutionary War began, Griffin submitted a plan of reconciliation with the English government, but it was rejected. He previously served 2 terms as a Virginia state legislator before being elected to the Continental Congress. He was the last president to serve under the Articles of Confederation. The need for a stronger federal government soon became apparent and eventually led to the Constitutional Convention of 1787 during his term. The present United States Constitution replaced the Articles of Confederation and were adopted on March 4, 1789. Since Griffin's term ended on November 15, 1788, there was no president serving during the next 5.5 months when George Washington was elected under the new Constitution on April 30, 1789. This is a summary of the key events and dates covered in this presentation, which occurred prior to and after the Revolutionary War, and which led to the formation of our current form of government. The beginning of the Committees of Correspondence began in 1764 and lasted for a 10-year period. The First Continental Congress was held in Philadelphia on September 5, 1774, and lasted 6 weeks. The Second Continental Congress, which was also held in Philadelphia, lasted for a 6-year period beginning in May of 1775. The Declaration of Independence was approved on July 4, 1776. Articles of Confederation were adopted in November of 1777, but they were not ratified until March of 1781, 3.5 years later. The Treaty of Paris, ending the Revolutionary War, was signed on September 3, 1783. The Constitution of the United States was signed on September 17, 1787, but it did not become effective until March of 1789. In 1783, with the signing of the Treaty of Paris between Great Britain and the United States, George Washington gave up his command of the army and returned to Mount Vernon. He was intent on resuming his life as a farmer and family man. However, in 1787, he was asked to attend the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia and head the committee to draft a new constitution. His impressive leadership convinced the delegates that he was the most qualified man to become the nation's first president. He was elected president under the new Constitution of the United States on April 30th, 1789, and served 2 terms until March 4th of 1797. He died 2 years later. Having watched this presentation, see if you can answer the following questions. Here are some additional questions. Under whose Here are the final 5 questions. The purpose of the Olive Branch Petition was to threaten war with Britain. Yes or no? Which colonial president resigned to become Minister of Spain? Which president served as Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court while serving as president? Which president served 2 separate terms? The president was authorized to do which of the following duties?